new President of the United States, and it reminds us that we fought our independence to be free from a monarchy so that we could live in a democracy. And so we see the president who is attempting to destroy basic institutions of government by directing his attorney general and others in administration to stonewall the American people. This is a crisis. Now, it's sad today that Attorney General Barr, who has refused to comply with a lawfully issued subpoena, and that behavior is unfortunately consistent with his overt campaign to protect the President of the United States. President Trump wanted his Roy Cohn, and he got his Roy Cohn. The Attorney General has demonstrated that he understands loyalty to the President rather than the oath to the Constitution. The Attorney General tried to shape the narrative of the Russia investigation from day one when he wrote a 4-page document, which was grossly misleading, where he took 4 pieces of 4 different sentences to capture a 400-page report. The report also directly contradicts several statements that the Attorney General made during his press conference, which he had before a single person was allowed to read the report. He said the President fully cooperated. We know, of course, the President refused to be interviewed, and his associates destroyed evidence relative to the investigation. He also publicly cleared the Trump campaign of coordinating with Russia while entirely leaving out the critical finding in the Mueller report that the Trump campaign was fully aware and expected to benefit electorally from information stolen and released through the Russian campaign. Since Mr. Mueller has completed the investigation, Mr. Barr has refused to release the full report to Congress, even after the issuance of a lawful subpoena. He's also refused to provide any of the underlying evidence. In fact, he's refused to do anything other than provide political cover to the president. In fact, when he was asked directly about his 4-page summary, he even said that he wasn't aware of what Mr. Mueller's position was on his summary, and we learned later that Mr. Mueller had written a letter criticizing his characterization, then had a 15-minute phone call doing the same, and Mr. Barr never shared that as well. And so we see an Attorney General
Operator,
has set out
Ordis wonders,
the president
what are you
at all
thinking
costs.
about?
And now we learn this morning in a letter from Mr. Barr that he's working with the President of the United States to try to provide a legal strategy to further obstruct justice and stonewall the American people by invoking executive privilege retroactively in a context where he knows it is not applicable. And really an effort to say, can we work together to try to prevent the American people from learning the full truth? You know, it's kind of curious that the president said complete exoneration. You think he would be rushing to get this report released if it really was a complete exoneration, but we know it's not. And so this is a question for us to decide as a committee. Are we going to allow the executive branch
Do you see anything interesting?
What we will get to see in order to conduct congressional oversight?
Fascinating choice.
If it is up to the executive branch and they decide what witnesses we can call, what documents can be produced, they will have effectively extinguished the right of congressional oversight. We cannot allow that to happen. We are, in fact, here on behalf of the American people to get to the truth, to gather the facts so we can make informed judgments on how to proceed next and what action to take next. We have a responsibility to ensure that people who are served with a subpoena comply with it, whoever you are, no matter how important you think you are. We live in a democracy and everyone must be treated the same. This is a search for the truth to demonstrate no one is above the law, including the President of the United States and the Attorney General of the United States, and that individuals must be held accountable for their misconduct. And so we have to gather up that evidence. I am saddened to hear my Republican colleagues who think this is anything but that. This is our responsibility. We took an oath. Our constituents and the American people are watching us, and the world is watching us. We must do the right thing. We must compel Mr. Barr to comply with a lawfully issued subpoena by this committee and get to the work of oversight, finding the truth wherever it leads us, and demonstrating most of all, in this country, no one is above the law, including the President of the United States. And with that, I yield back.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, for what purpose does the gentlelady from Alabama seek recognition?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, we've heard over and over again how the Attorney General has not accommodated this committee's demands. But let's walk through the timeline. I ask unanimous consent that the full timeline be included in the record.
Without objection.
On March 22nd, 2019, the Attorney General immediately notified the chairman and ranking members of the House and Senate committees on judiciary that he had received the confidential report from the special counsel. On March 24, 2019, 2 days later, the Attorney General informed Congress of the Special Counsel's principal conclusions. On March 29, 2019, 5 days later, the Attorney General updated Congress on the Department's review and outlined the 4 categories of redactions that the Department, with the Special Counsel's assistance, intended to make prior to the public release of the confidential report. On April 18, 2019, less than a month after receiving the confidential report, the Attorney General made the redacted version available to Congress and the public. However, on April 18, 2019, the same day, the Attorney General released the confidential report and made the minimally redacted version of the confidential report available for review. Chairman Nadler issued a subpoena to the Attorney General. On April 19, 2019, those House and Senate Democrats invited to review the minimally redacted confidential report wrote the Department to refuse the Attorney General's offer. To date, not a single Democrat, including Chairman Nadler, has reviewed the minimally redacted report. On May 1, 2019, the Attorney General voluntarily appeared before the Senate Committee on Judiciary, providing more than 5 hours of testimony regarding the Special Counsel's investigation and confidential report. The Attorney General had previously volunteered to appear before both the Senate and House Judiciary Committees. On May 2nd, 2019, Chairman Nadler's extraordinary and unreasonable demand that congressional staffers question the Attorney General, a cabinet secretary, in an oversight hearing forced the Attorney General to forego the hearing. On May 6, 2019, less than 3 weeks after issuing the subpoena, Chairman Nadler introduced a resolution to hold the Attorney General in contempt. Also on May 16, 2019, in an effort to accommodate the committee's interests, the Department wrote Chairman Nadler emphasizing, quote, the Department of Justice continued willingness to engage in good faith with the committee on these issues consistent with its obligations under the law, end quote. The Department offers to meet to, quote, negotiate an accommodation that meets the legitimate interests of each of our co-equal branches of the government, end quote. On May 7th, 2019, the Department met with the committee staff to offer additional accommodations in exchange for the committee postponing the scheduled contempt vote, including DOJ would significantly ease restrictions on the review of the less redacted report to allow designated members and staff to more easily review the report and confer with each other. DOJ would expeditiously bring the minimally redacted version of the confidential report to the House of Representatives to facilitate the chairman's review.
Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm John King. We're going to drop out of our live coverage here of the House Judiciary Committee hearing, but we'll continue to keep our eye on this in a packed hour ahead. As you're watching right there, this is a congressional clash in the Judiciary Committee over whether to hold the Attorney General of the United States in contempt of Congress. Also happening this second, the President holding a meeting with his cabinet at the White House. The bigger news this morning, the President, as this hearing was underway, invoking executive privilege over the entire Mueller report. Let's get straight to CNN's Manu Raju up on Capitol Hill. Manu, this has been partisan sniping back and forth all day. We're going to go back into this committee hearing when they have the actual vote. Take us inside what's transpired so far.
Yeah, that's right. Democrats are outraged by the White House's move to defy a congressional subpoena by invoking executive privilege and saying that what the Democrats have been requesting, which is the underlying evidence along with the redacted portions of the Mueller report, should be turned over. The president now saying that that should not be turned over because it could breach executive privilege. Now, what Democrats plan to do now is fight this probably in court after they vote in just a matter of moments to hold the Attorney General in contempt. Then the full House will vote to hold him in contempt. We don't know exactly when that full House vote will be, but it should be soon, perhaps in a matter of days. Then afterwards, Democrats plan to initiate court proceedings to try to get that information that they have been
forever. It was waived by Don McGahn when he spilled the number of instances when Donald Trump obstructed justice. Obstructed justice, that's a legalese term for acted guilty. A lot. This isn't about executive privilege. It's about burying the evidence, Mr. Chairman. If it was about executive privilege, the Attorney General would not have offered you to be able to view the documents and then tell you that you can't tell anyone what you saw. I thank you for not taking the latest Trump hush offer. We were attacked. We are in an information war with a foreign adversary. And I read the 200 pages of links between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And I also noticed what I didn't read. Not once did it say, by the way, all these contacts have ceased. By the way, all these people in the Trump family, the Trump businesses, the Trump campaign, the Trump administration, the Trump transition, they even managed to work with the Russians during the very narrow transition period. You give them 10 seconds, they'll find a way to find a Russian. That's how it worked. Nowhere in that report did it say, oh, by the way, these contacts ceased. Nowhere in the report did it say, there is no longer an ongoing threat from Russia. Nowhere in the report did it say, the Russians have no further interest in interfering in America. That's why we need this report. And I ask my colleagues, look at the person that you're going to such great lengths to protect. Look at this pathetic person
Boundary items can
who
be
stood
claimed.
at a press
Operator,
conference
are you pleased?
as our country was being attacked and said, Russia, if you're listening, you'll be rewarded if you keep attacking. That's the person you want to protect? That's the person you want to break the law for? That individual? And what does this person do after a 400-page report comes out? He calls the leader of the country that attacked us. At his request, President Trump called Putin. They talked for 90 minutes. President Trump described it as Putin was smiling. That's your leader, the commander-in-chief. He called the guy that attacked us. When we were attacked by Japan, Franklin Roosevelt did not call the Emperor of Japan. When we were attacked by Al-Qaeda on September 11th, George Bush did not call Osama bin Laden, and the President of the United States should only call Vladimir Putin for one reason, to tell him that this will never be tolerated, and he's going to unite the country to make sure that's true. The most basic function of a government is to protect its people from a foreign attack. If our president or the attorney general or his allies in Congress are unable or unwilling to do that, then we don't have a government. Fortunately, we're not powerless anymore. The American people voted to put a balance of power on all of these abuses of power. And this committee is going to protect and defend America, and it's going to start with holding this lawless attorney general in contempt. And I yield back.
What purpose does the gentlelady from Arizona seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. Members and audience, I ran for Congress to make a difference and get things done. We have a lot of big issues that are problems that are going on in our nation. We have a border crisis. I'm from Arizona. We have lots of humanitarian and border crisis going on. We need to improve the education system in our country. We need to work to improve our health care system. It's too expensive. And, when I served 9 years in the Arizona State House and Senate, we actually got big things done. I worked with my Democrat colleagues and my Republican colleagues, and we got issues done. And that's what the American people want us to do. They want us to work together to get things done. And this hearing today does nothing at all to further that cause. In fact, I think that my Democrat colleagues are still in denial that the president was actually elected. I saw it on election night. I stayed up late in Arizona and saw the meltdown of some of the, my Democrat colleagues and the media. And then for 2 years, even before the election of President Trump, for 2 years now, there's been this nonstop saying by my Democrat colleagues and others that, somehow the Trump campaign was colluding with Russia. And they even said they had evidence of it. They said it on TV over and over and over again. Well, it turned out to not be true. So 2 years later, you have the Mueller report. It says no collusion. No collusion. So instead of talking about that, which they've done for the last 2 years, now they're changing their tune. And so now it's all about obstruction of justice. Well, let's
Would you
review.
look at
Some
you?
of my colleagues have
Worthless,
already
ugly
went through this,
freaks!
but, you know, Attorney General Barr released the Mueller report. He didn't have to do that. The law to do it. But he did it because he did it for the public interest, to release the Mueller report. Again, no collusion. Then the Department of Justice offered for Chairman Nadler to review a less redacted version of the report. Chairman Nadler is now gone. And in fact, I think in volume 2, which is the obstruction of justice part, only 0.1% of the report is actually redacted. Then Attorney General Barr agreed to testify right here in Judiciary Committee on May 2nd. And what happened? Instead of us being able to hear from him and ask him questions, Chairman Nadler insisted that the staff should question the Attorney General Barr, which is unprecedented. You know, I believe, I don't know how to read this part, but I believe that here we had
Our position has been compromised.
The name tag.
Defend the cargo until reinforcements arrive.
Attorney General Barr, and then we had a member from this
used to be
committee,
builders, but
chicken,
now all they do
and
is make
pose
war.
with a ceramic chicken. I mean, this is a political theater, political show that makes for, you know, good TV. Are we getting things done? No, we are not getting.
Come on.
And now, President Chairman Nadler and this committee are asking the Attorney General to break the law by releasing grand jury information to Congress. So now we're here today, and there's been a movement, motion, to hold Attorney General Barr in contempt of Congress at an incredibly fast pace. From the subpoena to the contempt, 19 days. Let's compare that to Eric Holder. It was 255 days. And we still don't have all the documents from Fast and Furious where a Border Patrol agent was killed. So, all I can say is, let's come together and get things done. Let's stop this political theater. Week after week after week, we're just having this theater. The American people want us to work together to work on the big issues. Let's secure the border. Let's improve education. Let's improve health care. Let's stop this political theater. I yield back.
Young lady, yield back. Gentlemen, what purpose does the gentleman from California secret? Gentlemen, recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me ask 3 questions. First, what is the Trump administration hiding from the American people? Because the administration is not just stonewalling this committee, it's stonewalling every committee request for information on behalf of the American people. That is a direct violation of the Constitution. Under the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution, Congress has an absolute right to conduct open-end investigations on behalf of the American people. In fact, in Federalist Paper 51, Madison stated that in a Republican form of government, quote, the legislative authority necessarily predominates, unquote. We are Article 1 of the Constitution, and we will have that. Madison further says that 3 branches of government were set up, quote, subject matter as that ABA check on today's vote is more than just about the credibility of Bill Barr, but the credibility of our entire system of government. The Democrats on this committee intend to honor our oaths, Constitution, and the American people. Second question I want to ask. Why are Republicans on this committee reversing the very vote they took earlier this year to get the full Mueller report? The House voted 420-0 to get the full unredacted Mueller report, including most of the members of the Republicans on this committee. I'll tell you why. They have now realized that Bill Barr misled the American people. This Mueller report turns out to be bad for the president and his enablers. The report shows that the Trump campaign engaged in numerous contacts with Russian agents. They knew the Russians were to interfere in American elections. They welcomed it. They embraced it. They knew it was going to help the president win the election. That is immoral, that is wrong, that is unpatriotic. And that's just volume 1 of the report. Volume 2 of the report lays out 10 instances at least of obstruction of justice. Over 500 former prosecutors have now written a letter saying that for any ordinary American faced with this amount of evidence would have resulted in multiple felony charges. That's why it's so important we get the full unredacted report and the underlying evidence behind these charges, especially because Bill Barr admitted under oath he didn't even see the underlying evidence before he wrote his misleading stuff. And I'd like to also now correct a misleading talking point of my Republican colleagues, where they say somehow Bill Barr is complying with the law. No. The congressional subpoena is the law. How do you know that? That's what the court upheld during Watergate. DeAndre Worsley, the special prosecutor, issued a report. Then Chief of Staff Haldeman moved to suppress the report, relying on the same Rule 60 that Bill Barr is relying on. And the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals held squarely for Congress and said that under this congressional subpoena, the members of the House Judiciary Committee kept the grand jury secrecy secure. Bill Barr is violating the law right now. He is not complying with it. The congressional subpoena is the law. That's what the courts upheld. That's what they're going to do. Then the final question I want to ask: why is Bill Barr suing right now in federal court to eliminate pre-existing conditions of health? I don't know. I did know that Democrats are going to pass on before this week legislation to protect pre-existing conditions and to protect the health care coverage for millions of Americans.
Reinforcements available. Do you choose to leave now or continue fighting?
Pass legislation to move American families forward. And we're also going to conduct oversight as required by the United States Constitution. It is Donald Trump and the Republicans who are stonewalling. I hope they stop doing that. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back and seeks recognition. Gentleman,
Chairman,
what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
You, Mr. Chairman. To say that I'm disappointed in the direction of this committee, I'd say would be an understatement. I'm echoing what my colleague Nick Lesko said. Not sending you to get things done, and I feel like my call has been chasing since the last 2 years. During that time, we suffered from an opioid pandemic. I say pandemic because it's everywhere in the United States. It's killing thousands of individuals. We have real problems to address immigration. We could be moving to a merit-based system that brings us in step with the rest of the industrialized world. And I have 2 bills with Democratic co-prime sponsors that could really make a difference, but instead we're engaging in political theater, bringing in props, again, just chasing this ghost for the last 2 years. I have a bill called the Stoic Act with my colleague, Ms. Dean. This would increase grants to local law enforcement for suicide prevention, for PTSD treatment. Law enforcement, first responders need this. We can actually get this done. This is something that would be productive. We weren't wasting our time. I have another bill with my colleague across the aisle, Ms. Blunt Rochester. It's called Clean Slate. Seal the records
Our position has
anybody
been
convicted of a
compromised.
non-violent
Defend the
criminal
cargo
offense.
until reinforcements
Give these
arrive.
individuals a chance to have a fresh start, be productive members of society, and move on once they think they're done in society. This is something that thousands of people need across the United States. Something that would help the workforce development in the United States. But again, instead we're here 2 years chasing ghosts. So again, to say that I'm disappointed in the direction of this committee is an understatement, especially when we have real work that we can be focused on. With that, I would yield the balance of my time to the ranking member, Jeff Collins.
Thank you. I appreciate the gentleman yielding. I think as we're coming, in a lot of discussions, a lot of things have been pointed out. I want to just sort of sum up, and it's very interesting to me, and I'll just sort of be funny here. We in this country, we talk a lot about manufacturing and manufacturing jobs and need for well, we now have our committee pitching in because we're manufacturing a crisis. We're manufacturing something that doesn't need to exist and needs to happen. In fact, the reason I know it's a manufacturing crisis, I go back to the very words of many on the other side a few years ago, and even my chairman, when they joined to walk off of the House floor chamber to protest, in his words, the shameful and politically motivated GOP vote holding Eric Holder, Attorney General, in contempt. Walked off, upset, tore up, because we're holding Eric Holder in contempt after almost a year, over a year, 400 plus days. in which accommodations back and forth were made, discussions were made back and forth. So really, we're just manufacturing a crisis because, number one, we didn't get what we want. Number two, we don't like what we got. And there's nothing being hidden here. And yes, the Attorney General is following the regulations. Don't be deceived. He is. It's interesting that we go along. Also, there's some of the interesting things that have been talked about there. We talk about the Nixon impeachment in Article 3, and this has been thrown out by my colleagues. All the subpoenas issued to President Nixon, and again, a whole different inquiry, which is the impeachment inquiry, were issued after the impeachment inquiry was already started. These were not before the impeachment inquiry, they were after, and that's what we found then. In fact, the impeachment inquiry was opened on October 30th, 1973. All the subpoenas were from April to June of 74. So let's at least our facts. So we've had issues, all day today that we've had to sort of correct. Number one being that the chairman now of the Oversight Committee was not sued in his first capacity. Mr. Flynn is not in jail. He's pled guilty. He's still in that process, but he is not in jail, as was stated earlier. And also, though, I think we've finally come to the conclusion, and I think we've all been waiting for it. It's really something to come. And that was that my friend from Georgia actually gave us. And it really sort of summed up this entire thing. It's what I talked about last week. It's what I talked about. And my friend from Georgia said, and he brought down the curtain on this entire thing when he said, no document, how do we impeach? We don't have the documents, how do we impeach? Because right now, let's be honest, by that very statement, he's making the claim that they don't have enough to impeach because Mueller didn't give an impeachment. The report did not show collusion and did not charge obstruction. There's nothing to impeach. So now we got to dig deeper. And my question is this. A investigation of a very, and I'll agree with my friends across the aisle, from a top-notch investigator, from top-notch attorneys who had unlimited access to a grand jury, unlimited access to subpoenas, unlimited access to investigators, and over $30 million at least in budget, which is larger than any House committee. And we think we're going to find out something more than he found out? Come on, we're manufacturing a crisis, and that's why we're here. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does any member seek recognition? Gentleman of Maryland, recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Move to break the last word. Madam Chair, Tom Paine said that in the monarchies, the king is law, but in the democracies, the law is king. That is the principle at stake in America today. The President of the United States and all of us who seek and attain public office are nothing but the servants of the people and the servants of the law. And the moment that we forget that and we begin to act like the masters of the people and the masters of the law, then we put our jobs at risk. If the gentleman from Florida is so convinced that the Mueller report offers complete and total exoneration of the president, why doesn't he want the Congress and the American people to see it? Well, he says the Attorney General is only redacted 8% of the report. Madam Chair, you can redact 8% of the Constitution of the United States to get rid of freedom of the speech, freedom of the press, religious freedom, equal protection, and due process. You wouldn't have enough room to get rid of Article 1 of the Constitution, which is, I know, what some would like to do today. But Article 1 is the provision of the Constitution that establishes the powers of Congress, the lawmaking branch, the branch of the people. The president's sole job, primary job after being commander-in-chief, is to take care of the laws of and execute, not circumvented, not defied, and not violated.
Available. Do you choose to leave now or continue fighting?
Madam Chair, I think we need to remark how far this president has lowered our country. First, they destroyed the norms and the values of society, things that we'd always taken for granted. You don't mock people with disabilities. Men don't mock women's bodies on television. You don't ridicule people and give them obnoxious nicknames, at least after you graduate from the 3rd grade. You don't falsely accuse other political leaders of treason. You don't accuse other political leaders' parents of assassinating President Kennedy. You don't use disgusting, profane language to disparage other countries, and you don't call neo-Nazis and Klansmen very fine people. You don't give aid and comfort to the dictators of the world, like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, by flattering them and being their sycophants. But then you destroy the norms and the values of your office.
You call the press the enemy of the people. You call true facts fake news, and you call fake news true facts. You vilify and you demonize the hardworking employees of the Department of Justice and the FBI. You accuse them of being part of a fantasy deep state conspiracy just for doing their jobs. You falsely claim that millions of people voted illegally while you deny and dismiss the finding of Special Counsel Mueller that there was a sweeping and systematic campaign to disrupt our elections in 2016. You refuse to divest yourself of your business interests or to put them in a blind trust as other presidents have done. You travel to your own business properties and hotels on government expense. You double initiation fees to Mar-a-Lago.
The enemy
you
is
turn
at
the
our
government
doorstep.
of the United States into
We
a
must defend
money-making
our equipment
operation
until
for your
reinforcements
family,
arrive.
for your business, and for yourself. And then
Mystics and
you
archaic
violate and
weapons,
undermine the laws of the United
crude
States.
and dangerous,
You sabotage
just
the
like the
Affordable
Green
Care Act to try to deny millions of people access to their health care. You separate children from their parents at the border. You pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement, making our country an international environmental pariah and outlaw state. You lie about what science has shown about climate change. You call it a Chinese hoax. Collect millions of dollars from foreign princes and kings and governments in violation of Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8 of the Constitution. And now the president, aided and abetted by the Attorney General, tears at the very fabric of our Constitution. He orders that a curtain be pulled down over the executive branch. Says there will be no cooperation with the lawful demands of Congress for information. Congress shouldn't be looking anymore. The President King declares, this is all. It's done. No tax returns. No Mueller report. No witnesses. Not Don McGahn. Not John Gore. The President declares himself above and beyond the law. The Supreme Court has repeatedly stated that it is an essential and integral aspect of our power under Article 1 to do fact-finding investigations for the people. James Madison said, knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and those who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power that knowledge gives. The people, through the Constitution, gave us that power. We must exercise it. If you act with contempt for the people and Congress, we will find you in contempt of the people and of Congress. And I support the resolution. I yield back to you, Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. For what purposes the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I've sat here and listened, it's getting more and more frustrating to me, and I am sure to people watching at home, how distracted this committee is getting from the issues that truly matter to the American people. And we heard Congresswoman Lesko speak to those. When I get home, my constituents want to know, are we addressing the availability of health care and the accessibility of health care after the skyrocketing premiums that came into place from Obamacare? Are we taking action to reform and renew our highway and infrastructure system to keep up with our business economy? Are we working to stop the wave of illegal immigration flowing across our borders? These are just a handful of issues that we should be working on. We should be looking at ways to reduce government regulations and find ways to put more money back in Americans' pockets. And instead, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are calling for more and more investigation, pursuit of documents, even those they're not entitled to receive. And without a judicial proceeding, my colleague from California argues that we are entitled to receive it, not without a judicial proceeding. They're in search of a smoking gun of collusion, conspiracy with Russia that does not exist. Volume 1 of the Mueller report shows clearly it does not exist. Some of my colleagues are running for president on that coast, on that very coast, that somehow collusion with Russia still exists somewhere. This report proves there was no conspiracy. I was interviewed a while back, and I said, I hope that as much as possible is released to the American people, because whatever is redacted, they're going to point to and say, aha, that's where the smoking gun is. And sure enough, my colleagues on this committee just 5 minutes ago said, aha, that's where important information must be. Well, without a court order, that grand jury testimony is not allowed to be released. That is the law, and we talk about the rule of law. We talk past each other about the rule of law, but the law is the law, and a subpoena is not the law when it comes to grand jury testimony and whether that can be released.
Get
the law
comfy,
prohibiting
Dreams.
grand jury
One of
testimony
our
from being
own
released
believes they are
is
the
law.
equal of
So
our foe,
we
and
cannot see
baby,
the full Mueller report
they are
without
acting
judicial
like
action. The chairman can go to court and ask the judge to allow disclosure of 60 grand jury testimony. They don't need the administration to join. They want the administration to join. They say, work with us. But has the chairman, has this committee worked with the administration when it comes to the Attorney General appearing before this committee and getting questioned by staff members recently hired onto the committee? No, apparently not. In fact, the chairman hasn't even reviewed the unredacted version that's been provided. I listened with interest as the chairman mentioned in his remarks how important it is that we all read the report. But he hasn't gone down to read the report. This is a charade, and I have never seen anything like it. 225 days progressed from subpoena of Eric Holder to a contempt vote. This circus, 19 days.
Reinforcements available.
It's clear that this is just
Do you
a
choose
game
to leave now
for the majority.
or continue fighting?
And now that they have a bad hand, they're bluffing. Give us the unredacted report. We'll bar its bias. Don't worry about what the law says. The only bias is the blind hatred of this president and disdain for the rules of this House and the rule of law that is in this Constitution. The views and actions of the majority, the drive for impeachment trumps all. And yes, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. So they're trying to impeach the duck. It trumps the truth. It trumps the historic precedents of this committee. And it apparently trumps the laws of this nation. I am honored to be a member of this House of Representatives. I am honored to be a member of this committee, but that honor has been tarnished by the blatantly partisan actions of this committee today and the willful ignorance of this committee to the rule of law. I yield back.
Please recognition, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment, the lady from Washington. For what purpose, the gentlelady from Washington?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is definitely not a game. This is one of the most serious moments our democracy has faced. And it is a test. It is a test against an administration that is continually disregarding Congress. An administration that seems to have no regard for checks and balances.
Our position has been compromised.
It is unprecedented
Send the cargo
for
until
a
reinforcements
president
arrive.
to say that he will provide no cooperation with authorized subpoenas from Congress, no cooperation with witnesses coming to testify before Congress, and now, just as we've seen in this letter, an unprecedented effort to exert executive privilege, sweeping executive privilege over the entire Mueller report. Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, this is a lawless administration. And why is this important? I think we have to talk about this in a way that hopefully anybody who's watching can understand. Our system is based on checks and balances. That is part of our democracy. It is part of what our Constitution is here to do. Our Constitution said we will get our power as members of Congress from you, from the American people who vote us in as members of Congress. And then you give us the power to write the laws of this democracy. Then the Constitution says, and the president is there to faithfully execute those laws. And by the way, when the founders framed this Constitution, what they were afraid of is that there would be power concentrated in the hands of very few people, or in the hands of one person. And so what they did is they framed the Constitution so that they include checks and balances with three co-equal branches of government, at least but at least co-equal. And that was in order for each branch to have jurisdiction and authority over making sure another branch was not abusing their power, not obstructing justice, not using power for their own purpose instead of for the American people. And so now, if we have one brand saying we're not going to respect the authority of a co-equal branch, that puts us in a very, very dangerous position. And why is it that we want these materials? 100% of the materials, not 92%. Not just the chairman with one staff member, and then he's not allowed to talk about it to anybody else. But everybody. And the chairman has been very generous. He conceded that it would just be the members of the Judiciary Committee and the Intelligence Committees that would look at the full report, not just the unredacted report, but the underlying evidence. Why is that important? Because we need to see everything that was in the report. And frankly, the Attorney General has misrepresented what is in the report. Just look at these articles, the discrepancy between the Mueller report and Barr's summary. How Barr's excerpts compare to the Mueller report's findings. You know why the articles were written? They were written because Attorney General Barr misrepresented what was in the Mueller report. Here are the words of Mr. Mueller himself. Barr's summary letter did not fully capture the context, nature, and substance of this office's work and conclusions. This threatens to undermine a central purpose for which the Department appointed the special counsel, to assure full public confidence in the outcome of these investigations. So that is why we must see the full report, so that we can understand exactly what was in it. We can do our constitutional obligation. And I want to be clear that if the president refuses this request, refuses all subpoenas, refuses all witnesses, that affects every aspect of the American people's lives. It means that there is no oversight when the president seeks to strip healthcare away from millions of Americans. It means there is no oversight when this administration rips children away from their parents at the border. It means there is no oversight over the utilization of public power in the White House for personal gain. That is why it is incredibly important. I just want to take one quick thing. My colleagues keep talking about how crazy it was that we didn't, that we wanted to have staff counsel question the Attorney General for 30 minutes. Let me just read a quote from a member of Congress. The goal of attorneys is to depoliticize the process and get to the truth instead of grandstanding. You know who said that? Senator Chuck Grassley during the Kavanaugh hearings. And did any of my colleagues object at that time to Senator Grassley using an attorney to question the witnesses? No, they did not. I don't see anyone on record having said that. So, Mr. Chairman, let's be clear. We are at the brink of importance between democracy and dictatorship if we ignore checks and balances. And I fully support holding this Attorney General in contempt for refusing to comply with constitutional foundations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
And the lady yields back. The gentleman from Florida.
Amendment of the desk, Mr. Chairman.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment and the committee report for the resolution recommending that the House of Representatives find William P. Barr, Attorney General of the U.S. Department of Justice,
unless you can handle
Congress for refusal to comply with the subpoena duly issued by the Committee on the Judiciary, offered by Mr. Gates of Florida. The last paragraph on page 27, insert the following. Rule of construction, no provision in the resolution.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. The amendment is read, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier today, the gentle lady from Pennsylvania, the vice chair of the committee, said, and I quote, "Nobody is asking the Attorney General to break the law. Nobody is asking the Attorney General to break the law," close quote. And so that comment inspired me to write this amendment, to test the sincerity of that reflection by the leadership of the committee on the majority side. My amendment merely says that no element of the resolution or the report that's currently before the committee would be construed to require the Attorney General of the United States to break any law or break any rule of federal criminal procedure, expressly including but not limited to the rule that has the force of law that said that the Attorney General is not able to provide specific grand jury testimony. And so my hope is that my colleagues were in fact sincere, that this isn't about putting the Attorney General in a catch-22, but I fear
that may not be the case. Here's why. If the chairman wanted to, he would be able to go and read the remaining 8% of the Mueller report and, in fact, take notes on it and potentially even share his thoughts, impressions, conclusions on the House floor. We, in fact, have seen circumstances where the ranking member, in an effort to facilitate greater context and understanding and transparency about the work of this committee over the last 2 years, has, in fact, gone to the floor, utilizing the privileges of the House to release transcripts and testimony that shed light on the origins of this investigation, the true bias that infected the senior levels of the Department of Justice and the FBI. And so, if that was what this was really
Operator,
about,
the system
my friend
needs
from
you.
Maryland, my
Will
friend
you
from
begin
Washington
another
both said,
mission?
well, 8%, that could be the whole deal. That could be as significant as the freedom of speech and the freedom of press. I mean, we could find things in this 8% of the report that fundamentally reshape our understanding of the Mueller probe. If that's the case, then just do it. Well, tell us what's in it. You have the ability to go read it, come back and share with the rest of the Congress and the rest of the country.
Would the gentleman yield?
Well, since my microphone was cut off last week, I'm going to try to use it all this week when I have the time, so I'm not going to yield. I do think, though, that as we've heard our colleagues wax poetic about the rule of law, it's important to highlight some of their statements. My friend from Rhode Island said, the rule of law questions are deadly serious. Deadly serious, like life or death, these rule of law questions. And so, if we are holding up the rule of law as this great virtue, why then would we ask the Attorney General to break the law in order to serve the rule of law? My friend from Washington said this is one of the greatest tests of the committee. This tests our muster and our merit to see whether we will continue this pursuit of the truth. It is my expectation that this is in fact on purpose. That what the majority has tried to do is put the Attorney General in a situation where they can generate conflict. And they need that conflict because they have a narrative of impeachment that currently binds their caucus. I mean, look, with the Democratic Party right now, you got a fundamental problem. You got one group control the levers of power, the Speaker Pelosi's, and the senior leadership of the Democratic Party. And then you got this whole other batch of people who really control the energy of the party. They're on this facts march to a factless.
But now all they do is make war.
So they have to go and generate these little skirmishes to keep the hamsters on the hamster wheel, so they're more rambunctious members won't rush to the floor in search of impeachment. And it's just, let's just be honest that that's why we're doing this. Let's be honest about the fact that you are using the Attorney General of the United States as a whipping boy because you can't go after a popular president who's got a humming economy who has seen his approval rating rise since the release of the Mueller report. So do us all a favor. Do the rule of law a favor. Provide substantive legislation that reflects on the words your own committee leadership has used in this very meeting. You will not use this process to impair the rule of law and to ask the Attorney General of the United States to break the law. And if, by the way, if there's nothing in your report or resolution that demands that the Attorney General break the law, vote for it. Vote for my amendment. But you won't, because you know the real purpose of this is to distract the country, create a fictitious conflict, divide us even further after you were proven to not be telling the truth as a party about the Russian collusion hoax. I think we can do better. I think this amendment clarifies your words, but you won't vote for it because it's not really what you're doing. And I will not.
General yields back. I recognize myself for 5 minutes on the Syracuse voters and witch hunts and side, which I don't agree with, obviously. Although I do appreciate the gentleman's use of colorful imagery of the hamster on the hamster wheel. It has never been our intention, as stated before, to ask the Attorney General to violate the law. We've always intended, we've made it very clear, we want to work with us to ask for exactly that to see. But having said that, the amendment simply restates our intent, and therefore I accept the amendment. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, Mr. Chairman. Gentleman from Arizona. What purpose is the gentleman from Arizona? Gentleman's ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate your willingness to support the gentleman from Florida's amendment. I appreciate that. I'm going to also support both of them. But I just want to make one thing perfectly clear again, as I iterated before, and it goes to something that the chairman just said. And it gets to the heart of this thing, and that is, if really one were to believe that the underlying contempt citation was issued irrespective of and not put in, designed to put Mr. Barr into a box where he's got a binary choice, effectively saying, I'll either violate the federal law or I will be held in contempt. I just find it somewhat awkward that he was invited then to go to court and appeal to the court and say, give me permission to review this redacted information pursuant to Rule 60. I mean, I just think that's really interesting, because nobody would really say we need to go to court if you didn't believe that you didn't have authority. And that's so it's obvious to me that maybe people don't believe they have the authority. They feel they need to go to court. And so I think this amendment, and I'm glad the chairman supports it, because I think this amendment clarifies that it's not the intention of this committee, and nor does Mr. Barr, is he obligated to violate the federal rules. So with that, gentleman, I'll yield back.
Anyone else back? Question was the gentleman from California secret.
Right. One of the great principles of legislating is to accept a win. So I'm hoping that we can agree to this and go on to whatever further discussions we may have. I would just like to say that, as I listened to the debate, I listened carefully, the concept that it would be reasonable for Mr. Collins and Mr. Nadler to be the only one among our members to review this material is astonishing. For example, Mr. Sensenbrenner has been a member of Congress since 1979, and he would not have something to offer if he reviewed this. It's not correct. I've been a member of this committee since 1995. I would have something, I think, to offer if I could review this. So I hope that we can get past the idea that what's been accepted, but proposed by the department and then what's on is acceptable outcome. And I will yield to the chair.
Thank you, gentlelady. I just want to comment on what we the gentleman from Mr. Buck. As I said, Biggs. As I said repeatedly, and as the record will bear out, the subpoena never intended to cover Rule 60. It's always been made clear that they understand that it is unlawful to get grand jury intervention without permission of the court. That's why we have asked the Attorney General to join us in petitioning the court to get grand jury material. That is the practice that has been in similar situations, in fact, in every similar situation I can think of, in which the Attorney General has gone to court with the committee and gotten the court's permission to use 60 material. But we are disappointed that the Attorney General is not doing that, has declined to do that for reasons he won't state. But contempt citation is for ignoring the subpoena, in effect. It was never intended to give him to put him in jeopardy by saying you have to give up 60 material. This amendment makes it crystal clear, and we're perfectly happy to accept it, since that was always our intent. And there's certainly no contradiction between saying you have to obey a subpoena, which is not intended to include 60 material. But by the way, let's ask for the 60 material separately as for report. So I hope that clarifies things, and I urge a yes vote on the amendment. I go back to Mr. Chair. Gentlemen
Move to strike last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I'm glad that the chairman has said this, but let's also be clear that this motion is also for the report of this content hearing that we're asking to now. We actually offered an amendment during the subpoena, which you just very eloquently that you said it didn't require 6E in your subpoena. But when we offered an amendment to exclude 6E, we voted for that amendment. Y'all rejected that amendment. So it's interesting that it may not, if you're saying now it doesn't include 6E information, but when we specifically offered an amendment to the subpoena that excluded 6E, you voted for that amendment, you rejected that amendment. There's a contradiction in terms. I'm glad we're accepting it, not going away with the point.
The enemy is at our doorstep.
As we go forward.
You must defend our equipment until reinforcements arrive.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I also appreciate the chairman accepting this amendment. I am confused, though, and legitimately confused. I'm not trying to make a political point here. My understanding is that the Attorney General's report redacted classified information, grand jury material, and ongoing investigations. I'm confused at what we are arguing about if we're not arguing about grand jury material. Gentlemen, you? Yeah, absolutely. We're arguing about there are 4 categories of material that the Attorney General tells us to redact. Grand jury material, which we're not considering as this amendment here. Things that impact other criminal investigations. Things that may cast aspersions on third-party reputations, and most of the classified, and of course classified information. Plus, of course, all the underlying material. We're talking about those 3 categories of material, not including the grand jury material. The other 3, plus the underlying evidence materials for the report itself. That's what we're talking about. That's what we've always been talking about.
So reclaiming my time, we have access to classified material in a scale.
We have not recorded that. It's part of the request. It's part of the subpoena.
May I yield to the gentleman? This is it. We just hit on something. This is exactly why we're too focused on this. Appreciate the chairman bringing it, but that was a very long thing, because that is the part of working with the DPL Foundation. That's exactly what we should be doing here, not rushing to him. This is, and again, I got back to my original 6E information. If it wasn't a part of the subpoena, then why protect an amendment that actually said that? And I think that's the curiosity, but I appreciate the chairman. This is not a criticism, and I agree with my friend from Colorado. This is not a criticism, but this is exactly why, again, for those of us who've been here a while, this is why this contempt is too quick. You can get to attempt at some point.
We attempt to negotiate, I think, we attempted to negotiate with the Department of Justice, 2 months. They refused to talk to us. They finally, only under threat of this contempt proceeding, were they willing to talk about an accommodation in the last 2 days. And then, my opinion is their so-called accommodation was not an accommodation at all. But for 2 months, we tried to initiate negotiations with them over precise things you're talking about, and they refused to talk.
And we're reclaiming my time. And I think we're claiming the time here. You're exactly right, but 2 months ago, we're just at the very beginning of the report. It just came out. And again, this has been talked about a lot. But I think this is a healthy debate, right? It's all exactly what we're talking about. This is, I think the reason that we're concerned, and I'm concerned, and many of us concerned about the actual move to contempt here, is 2 months when looked at in the prism of just the last little bit in this Congress and the previous Congresses. The timing here is what we're talking about. And it's been said earlier, and I didn't say this earlier from when some of there's been comments on the other side, this said that when we get to court, when you go to court on a contempt, a civil contempt, especially like this, is that the judge will look at what accommodations and what process has been made. If we have cases in direct discussion here in which over 400 days were used, 300, these are the kind of things.
Gentlemen, yield 1 second.
I just want to yield back. I want to yield back to Mr. Butler. I'm yielding to
the gentleman yield.
I only have 10 more seconds.
I thank you. I would simply point out that 2 months of refusal to talk to us or to negotiate is not trivial.
I never, and Mr. Chairman, I'll take back my time. I'm not saying it's trivial, but it's not nothing. It's not enough either. And I think that's where our terminology. And again, Mr. Chairman, you yourself were very critical of holding Mr. Holder in contempt. Very critical of being held in contempt. And that was a process that lasted a long time. My time doesn't end.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I just have a few more questions in good faith. Move to strike the last room. Okay, move to strike the last room.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am wondering what prevents the committee attorneys from going to court and asking the court to disclose grand jury material. We could ask for that waiver ourselves. We don't need the Attorney General.
Gentleman, you have an answer?
Yeah, would you?
Nothing. We intend to do exactly that, but the application is greatly strengthened if it is supported by the Attorney General, as opposed to the Attorney General either opposing it, which we don't know what he would do, or not supporting it. He has said he would not support it. In every previous case where the committee has gone to support and ask for 60 material, the Attorney General has supported that. What is new is that he has said he would not support the request, and he's given no reason.
And Mr. Chairman, taking my time, I believe that in every single case, at least ones that you have cited in the past, there was an ongoing impeachment proceeding or a select committee that had been impaneled to hear that to the general deal. Yeah.
No, that's not correct. For instance, Kenneth Stoughton, the special prosecutor, jury for grand jury material, went to the court rather for jury material well before there was an
in that situation, we were operating under a different set of rules. There had been a law passed by Congress.
Also, actually, also for the question of Judge Hastings. And let me just say what you just said. Yes, we're operating under a different set of rules, but they do not. The initial grant of power for the special prosecutor and the special counsel differs, and some other things differ too. But they don't differ in any respect with any way with respect to the ability to get information or the ability to seek the Attorney General's assistance in going to court to get it.
The law that was passed from the independent counsel statute specifically granted Congress the ability to get grand jury material. The regulation...
No, that's incorrect. I'm told that's not true.
The regulation...
That it granted it at the discretion of the court.
I just would recommend in essence that that we hold a vote that this committee authorize the staff to go to the court and ask for grand jury.
Well, we certainly intend to do that. I don't know if we need a vote of the committee to do so. If we do, we'll hold such a vote.
I think that resolves at least a portion of.
I don't know that it's a question. We certainly intend to do that.
You're back.
Question occurs on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted.
Extraction is ready. Unless you can handle more of
I have an
the
amendment to this, Mr. Chairman.
I recognize myself for the purpose of offering an amendment. Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee report for the resolution recommending that the House of Representatives find William P. Barr, Attorney General, U.S. Department of Justice, in contempt of Congress for refusal to comply with the...
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. I now recognize myself for the purpose of explaining the amendment. I am introducing this amendment in order to address the last-minute purported claim of executive privilege by the President over the entirety of the material sought by this committee's lawful subpoena. This is a development that just occurred this morning. It is regrettable that this unfounded claim interrupted negotiations that had finally begun after the committee's many requests. The Attorney General and the Department of Justice ignored our repeated attempts at accommodation and compromise for well over a month. Only in the face of a contempt resolution did the Department begin to engage in a discussion of accommodation without producing a single page of the underlying evidence or materials. When that effort failed, the Attorney General took the extraordinary step of asking the President to assert executive privilege in order to conceal the entire special counsel report, and all the evidence and materials underlying it. There is no legal right to stonewall or to obstruct legitimate oversight. That is what we have been seeing as a result of the President's declaration that he is, quote, fighting all the subpoenas, unquote, issued by Congress. The Attorney General may believe that he is merely following orders and seeking to prevent Congress from carrying out its constitutional responsibilities. But history has shown time and again that the first line of defense against undemocratic rule is for those individuals asked to carry out indefensible orders to show the courage, independence, and belief in the institutions under attack to just say no, as the President's former counsel, Don McGahn, did on a number of occasions. We are disappointed that the Attorney General has again shown with his actions today that he is not that person.
The old war,
He has left this committee no choice but to reject baseless, improper, and indefensible blanket assertion of executive privilege and pass this resolution holding him in contempt. I am proud we are taking this action in defense of our great nation's constitutional system of checks and balances, which, make no mistake, is clearly under attack. I am proud of this committee for standing up in defense of our democratic institutions and principles that we hold so dear. I yield back the balance of my time.
I did, Mr. Chairman.
What?
Seek recognition to oppose. That's right, last word. Thank you. I think we're interesting now going into this and then trying to come up with something that, let's just go back, on some grounded points here. Executive privilege is grounded in the Constitution, for the privileges and waivers must be intentional. What we're trying to do and arguing through your amendment here is argue the executive branch, talking to the executive branch is somehow a waiver of these. Chairman says that because the report is public, executive privilege has been waived. You rely on the SB case referred to as in re Steele case. The court that had executive privilege waivers must be intentional. In the SB case, the White House counsel's office conducted an investigation and made the resulting report public. In fact, the court said since executive privilege existed, the governmental decision-making process, a waiver should not lightly inferred. The court had refused to approach to executive privilege. Quoting from the very decision that you're relying upon for this motion, the courts have said that the release of a document only waives the privileges for the document or information specifically released, but not for related materials. Here, all the underlying materials not made public are privileged. This is a balancing test where a crime has occurred in the Nixon case. Here, there is no crime that occurred in the Mueller, as the Mueller report demonstrated. In Ray Seale's case, the court also said the privilege should not extend to the staff outside the White House in executive branch agencies. Instead, the privilege should apply only to the communications authored or solicited and received by those of the immediate White House advisor staff who have broad and significant responsibilities for investigating and formulating the advice to be given to the President on a particular matter of which the communications relate. This is an interesting point and should be pointed out because actually when we had our markup and the subpoenas that were issued were to Annie Donaldson, Don McGahn, Steve Bannon, Hope Hicks, and Ryan Priebus, the highest ranking officials some of the highest ranking in this White House, and the very people the court held that should have executive privilege. And when we look at this in the underlying report, even in the Mueller report, just getting around it because we don't like it through an amendment is not getting around this. And I think when coupled with the fact that we have had discussions here of rushing to this, not having an accommodation process, not talking, and many times, as you well know, and folks who have been here a while, it does take what I'll call, those termination rules, those people. There's not an impasse here. And I think that's the interesting part about this. And it's always talked about in contempt is what is the impasse? There is no impasse here because there's at least still negotiations, even from what the Department of Justice offered yesterday, to say if we go to this step, we'll be back next week and we'll discuss some more. There is an impasse.
Navigation updated with new invasions. Chaos is spreading.
Actually, the same thing was done by President Obama in the Eric Holder case, but actually not for those closest to the president himself, but for actually lesser officials. So in looking at this is not new in the exertion of the executive privilege. The case that you're relying upon, even in the most generous reading, is a 50-50 toss-up for what you're trying to do here with this. And that's at the most generous of reading. At a sort of what I would say is a factual reading in it, it's not 50-50. It says that this is actually held. So as we go down this line, I understand the chairman's frustrations. I disagree with the chairman's frustrations on the fact that you're not getting the information that you want, or you're at this point not getting it the way you want it. But it has been pointed out that you have the ability to go to court to try and make this happen. Also, before I quit here, the Starr case is not precedent. We keep bringing this up. The Starr case is not precedent. One, the statute's defunct, and also today we have what is the Clinton era Special Counsel Investigation Regulations, which is what Bill Barr is actually operating under. So if we want to go back and discuss, again, non-applicable precedent here, that is something issue because the Starr report was actually made for the purpose of giving recommendations for impeachment. That's not what has happened under the special counsel's advice here, and was not why the Mueller report was actually done. So if we count this case from a strictly legal reading, again, at best, it's a 50-50 jump ball to say that this is actually for it. But if you actually get into it, and especially what your subpoenas asked for, those closest to the president, this case actually sides and lends more toward what my argument that this case does not apply, and that your amendment is not should not be well taken. It should be voted down. We have a lot left to go here. There's more problems with this than just the executive privilege issue that has been listed here. There is the problem of once you get before a judge and say, what did you actually do to ask and get to this? There's no accommodations been made. This is, again, a process and a rush to judgment. I would encourage all members to read the case, read the underlying case that this is based on, and reject this motion as it is offered. And with that, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Having used far less than my allotted 5 minutes, and having just realized that in the case in which we prepared this, I neglected to actually describe what the amendment actually does, I yield myself 15 seconds for that purpose. The amendment supplements the contempt report to address the Attorney General's statement last night and letter this morning that he is asserting executive privilege over the redacted portions of the report and all underlying materials. The amendment also then explains some of the many reasons why we believe that assertion of privilege lacks any valid basis. I yield back. Who seeks recognition? Then we'll take the vote on the gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Pennsylvania seek recognition? Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for offering this amendment, which I support. I was puzzled, maybe like many of you, that we received this morning. I received it here in hand at about 10 o'clock this morning. A letter dated today, May the 8th, 2019, addressed to the President, the White House, Washington, D.C. Dear Mr. President, I am writing to request that you make a proactive assertion of executive privilege with respect to the Department of Justice documents recently subpoenaed by the Committee on Judiciary of the House of Representatives that is signed by William Barr, Attorney General, not personal attorney to the President, Attorney General Barr. And I contrast that with something I was taking a look at dated January 29th of last year, 2018, written by personal attorney for the President, John Dowd, to Robert Mueller. In response to Robert Mueller asking for the President to come on in and testify, to interview with the President and discuss concerns regarding the report and the investigation, there's a list of some 15 areas of concern that the special counsel asked for the President to come on in and discuss. And guess what his personal attorney, John Dowd, said during this long letter? After reviewing the list of topics you presented, it is abundantly clear to the undersigned that all of the answers to your inquiries are contained in the exhibits and testimony that have already been voluntarily provided to you by the White House and witnesses, all of which clearly show there was no collusion with Russia and that no FBI investigation even could have been obstructed. Farther down in the letter, we all remain in agreement that your office has received unprecedented access and voluntary cooperation in the collection of all documents requested by the White House. It goes on to further say, in an effort to provide complete transparency, the President waived the obviously applicable privileges where appropriate in order to show both the Congress and the special counsel to see all relevant documents. His personal attorney more than a year ago waived the privilege. That everybody came in, they had the right to testify, they had the right to meet, they spoke for hours whether it was McGahn or any others, Pope Hicks and others. And yet this morning, the Attorney General asked the President, please claim, put a big drape over this thing. Please claim privilege. And then we later got a letter from the Attorney General saying he's claimed privilege. So I guess there was a conversation there. Imagine that. An Attorney General sworn to uphold the oath of his office to be an independent, highest voice of the law of the land, hanging a heavy drapery of distortion, distraction, and deception over this incredible, important investigation. Mr. Chairman, we are at a grave moment. I thank you for holding this very important hearing on contempt. Our constitutional system of government is in jeopardy. We have to make sure that we protect the rule of law. We are up against an administration that cares nothing for the rule of law, cares only for self. And we need to see the entire Mueller report. Mr. Barr has given away his credibility here. We know that. His letters have no meaning because they do not reflect the truth. So I stand in support of your amendment and, of course, in support of the underlying contempt report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields back. What purpose is the gentleman from North Dakota seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
I think we have some signals crossed. Until about 30 seconds ago, or 5 minutes ago, or 10 minutes ago, this subpoena was for a full unredacted version of the Mueller report. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have given speeches, have cited cases, relevant, about releasing 6E material. We just had a witness, or just had a speech saying we get the entire report. Now we're hearing conversations about 6E isn't necessarily in it, but it's in the subpoena. The subpoena is simple. It is fully to have the unredacted Mueller report. And just in the way that words matter, the letter didn't say a proactive assertion of privilege. It said a protective assertion of privilege. And I think we can reasonably argue that one of the reasons they're doing a protective assertion of privilege is in order to comply with the subpoena, they would have to violate the law. Now, we talk about asking the Attorney General to go to court to release rules or grand jury evidence. We talk about how that has happened in the past. First of all, in the case that it happened in the past, it was actually the Haldeman case, and the reason the court ruled in favor of releasing the information is because they ruled that it was a legal proceeding because it was an impeachment proceeding. Secondly, the Attorney General has no obligation to go to court, and by issuing a subpoena, this committee cannot compel him to go to court. This committee can go to court on its own to try and release that information, but by the way, and I'll be offering an amendment later, there's no guarantee that is going to happen either. So when we're having this conversation, when we're giving speeches, when we're going on CNN, when we're going on MSNBC, let's at least talk about what this is about. The subpoena was to release the full unredacted report. And regardless of the colloquy we're having today, regardless of the debate we're having on this dais about that very information, that's what the subpoena says. So when you issue a protective assertion of privilege, you have the right to do that, particularly, I think, if you're the Attorney General and you think you'll have to violate the law in order to comply with the subpoena. Secondly, and I think it becomes interesting and more important when we discuss how this has moved forward where we're at. And that, I mean, we're citing the SB case, we're saying that we have all of these issues, but nothing that redacted has been shared. It's only been shared from executive to executive. None of the underlying information has been shared. Say that there isn't a valid claim of assertion of executive privilege on that information, I think I agree with the ranking member, the jump ball at best.
Gentlemen, Mr. Armstrong, with great respect, I guess the question may be to Ranking Member Collins. You said that executive privilege has not been waived with respect to the redacted portions of the report. Now, I'm not talking about the grand jury piece. I'm talking about the other pieces. My understanding is that the ranking member has seen that unredacted material. Am I mistaken?
I haven't seen it, so
I know you've seen it, which is why we're here. Right? As well as the members, I would say, of the Intelligence Committee, I might add, can have access to those unredacted portions of the report so that we can ultimately do our jobs. So that's I just want to clarify that, Pete.
And the answer, I think, is when you go to a contempt proceeding if you're working through this. I'm confused now about the material as part of the subpoena. Actually, I'm not known it part of the subpoena, but as part of the conversation that has gone on. So asserting protective assertion of privilege, I mean, they have the right to do that. When the ranking member is seen in hesitancy,
defend the cargo until reinforcements arrive.
Different conversation.
I yield back. Gentlemen, you're back. Seeks recognition. The lady from, what purpose the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition? Gentlelady's recognized.
I'd like to thank Mr. DeGoose for giving a moment of clarity for the basis of this hearing and this markup, which is to illuminate on the unredacted entirety of the document redacted. But I'd like to add just a point or two of clarification. I just want to ask the question, if the document was issued during the time frame of 2012 to 2016, the previous president, what my friends on the other side of the aisle would be engaged in. No different in my mind that they would be raging for the entire report. They would not only subpoena, they might even use inherent powers to attempt to incarcerate some of the administration officials under the Obama administration. We now are working on the basis of our chairman having worked extensively on accommodation. That terminology means that we've been reaching out to the Department of Justice to work with their lawyers to find a common ground to provide the documents that we ask. To clarify the gentleman, Mr. Armstrong's point, we understand the law over here. We understand that the 6E materials are materials that deal with matters that will have to be reviewed by the court. We don't intend to utilize materials randomly. So we've asked the Attorney General to come to court with us. Of course, these documents are important because they go to the full understanding of the American people. We know that many of those documents may be held in a classified or confidential manner. We would intend to do that if that was necessary by the court. So to act as if you are confused, the resolution speaks for itself. The unredacted document in its entirety, the supporting materials, documents that Mr. Mueller utilized, and appropriate 6E as dictated by a court proceeding, which we would go and hope would move expeditiously. The reason why this is so important for the courts to look at this seriously is, again, whether you use the word protected or proactive, it is the request for a blanket use of the executive privilege, which, as I said earlier, is historic. Today, on this day, 2015, we're seeing a request on May 8th for something that has never been requested by any president of the United States, no matter how much review, investigation, and trouble they might be. So this is historic. And I believe the very infrastructure of the Constitution, there is no way that we can yield or cede to a blanket request for executive privilege. And I asked a rhetorical question as to what my friends would have done if this same document had come out between 2012 and 2016, and what the American people would have asked us to do. And so I believe we should move on the resolution, the underlying resolution, because we have seen actions that have never been recognized. We have sought an accommodation. We received letters on May 8th today, both the letter to us indicating that we had breached the accommodation, and the breach came from the Attorney General, not from this committee. we're still negotiating late into the night. That should be very clear. And as well, the seeking of a proactive, protective assertion of the executive privilege. I would offer to say to you an executive privilege that has been paid. Let's get on with our work, finding out the truth, and let's clarify what Mr. Nadler is asking for. I think he's been very clear, and I certainly think he had measured in his attempt to work through this with the attorney. And I would hope that we would rise to support the resolution, of which I support. I yield back.
And the lady yields back. For what purpose did you come into Colorado situation?
It was a strike force group.
Gentlemen is recognized. Yield
such time as this is one of the things that I've thought about a while, and as I mentioned, it was very true and sincere. I think we have a lot of good attorneys on this committee. That's why we were, getting questions. And I would, if my friend from Texas and I were in a courtroom together, my immediate thought was, trial lawyer would be objection calls for speculation. You're asking what speculation would be and what we would say, but I don't have to have speculation on this. I have fact. What did happen during the previous administration when a contempt proceeding was going on? They actually made the preemptive assertion. Jim Cole actually made the preemptive assertion for the privilege. My friends across the aisle actually disagreed with this, didn't want it to happen. In fact, walked out, made a big production saying it was all political, and they should have never held Eric Holder in contempt. The interesting part is, and I go back to this, is that was over 400 days. We're still up, even at the generous months level here. And it's really interesting because I want to go back to the issue that Mr. Goose brought was a valid point, it's something to bring up, but it also strengthened my argument that we're going too quickly. That there were accommodations made. The Department of Justice were in the process of making accommodations and did that from the original intent, letting members go. I never saw definitive statements that that's all we'll ever do. Okay, and I did go see it. That was public record. I did go see it. The chairman is not going to see it. The gentleman, I will.
Thank you, member, with all the respect in the world, while I appreciate that, it seems to me that it's been pretty clear from the Department of Justice that they will only allow you and the chairman of this committee, as well as a few other members of this Congress and this House, to see the materials you have. Our point is that the Republican members of the Judiciary Committee, as well as the Democratic members of this committee, as well as the Republican and Democratic members of the Intelligence Committee, ought to be able to review these materials to perform their critical constitutional duties, and that's why the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, joined with the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, in making the same request that this committee has made.
Yeah, reclaiming my time, and I appreciate the gentleman there,
and I think this is the exact thing. That was the request I actually made yesterday. Is we'll have this request. There's never been a defendant who's actually seen a request, an offer made yesterday. It was rejected, and that's why we're here today. That's part of negotiations. As anyone who's went through a negotiation process, that's part of negotiation. You may not like the timing, you may not like it, but again, in less than 40 days, it's pretty interesting. When we had 400 days and over 300 days with Holder, and then also with Myers and Bolden. Again, I think we're conflating the issues here, and it's really interesting. The 6E information, we don't need to gloss over that. If you're watching and you're seeing this, don't gloss over the fact that we previously in this committee, the majority rejected an amendment that said 6E information. This information.
Our position has been compromised. Defend the cargo until reinforcements arrive.
I go back to a statement that I made just the other day when the chairman and I were talking about government. It goes back to this, and this is just true. We vote on words on paper, not intent. We vote on words on paper, and what words on paper say matter, and intent is one that it may intend that we don't ask for this, we may intend that we don't want this, but that's not what we vote on this time.
I thank the gentleman. We certainly could be in the courtroom. I just want to clarify that Mr. Holder's activities were far more distinctive for the actual acts of the President of the United States. We are dealing with the actual acts of a President of the United States. And what I was saying, that occurred between 2012 and 2016. My good friends rushing toward a particular procedure. This has nothing. This has to do with actual acts of the president.
I'll reclaim my time, and that is exactly what my friends and his mother said. They're all law rushing for, but I'll also go back to this amendment to the gentlelady. This amendment is actually based on a case, and as I laid that out very clearly, this case is when you look at it, the whole amendment doesn't apply there. I think this all goes into the very assumption this is why this is rushed. That's why we said this all along. And it just goes back to the court. They can afford it. My friends say this to continue. That's what they're continuing to do. Keep that flag. Now that record. Oh, there. Mr. Chairman.
The news back for service is the gentleman. Oh, gentlelady, for what purpose is gentlelady access to seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last one.
Gentlelady's recognized.
I think it's so important for us to come back to why we're here. And to understand why there's so many efforts to prevent us from getting to the full truth. Let's remember what we all know. We all know that Russia, a foreign adversary, attacked our country. And they did that. We know that a campaign, the president's campaign, knew about that attack. We know that they welcomed that attack. We know that they tried to prevent others from knowing about that attack. We know that they made false statements about the attack. And after everyone knew, the president then struck the investigation about that attack. And the thing that we know, and this is what we have to remember as Americans, they are still at it. They were wildly successful in trying to get sides of our election. Wildly successful. And they are still at it. That's why we are here. That's why we are trying to get to the truth. That's why we are fighting so hard for the American public to have access to everything. It's not that complicated. It's actually pretty simple. But I'll tell you, I'm new here. And earlier, one of my colleagues said, she's also new, how this whole thing really saddens her. And Mary Day, it saddens me too. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. Something that should be unifying Republicans and Democrats alike. Fighting for this country. Fighting for the integrity of our democracy. Fighting for our election. Fighting for the American people. But instead, this is what we get. We get different ways and avenues and strategies to obstruct getting to the full truth. I want to remind everyone here, and I want to remind the American public about the oath that we took. We took an oath the day we were sworn in to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Further, that we will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. I remember my oath. I take my oath seriously. And all of these efforts to create obstacles and roadblocks to getting to the full truth, shame. Shame, shame, shame. Mr. Chairman, I support your amendment. I support this resolution. And it's about time that everyone unites and fight for the American public.
The gentlelady yield.
I do. I yield.
Yes, we simply do not have 400 days to wait for making sure that we are protected in the 2020 election. We know that in 2016, the Russians interfered with our election so that they could help Donald Trump get elected. Donald Trump will stand for re-election again in a very short period of time, and we don't have 400 days to wait to determine whether or not we are in shape to withstand any additional attempts for the Russians to try to interfere to help Trump get re-elected. And I don't want the public to be confused. 6E is not the issue here. We know that we have to get with the courts in order to obtain grand jury information. We know that, and we're prepared to do that. Ordinarily, the Attorney General would go with us to court to do that, but he doesn't want to do that. But the other three things that they are withholding information from, they are redacting the Mueller report for are for ongoing matters. They don't say ongoing investigations or prosecutions, ongoing matters. What does that mean? National security, sources and methods. We can deal with that. And then embarrassing information on peripheral third parties not charged. Those are things that we need to be negotiating about, and this administration has refused to do so, and that's what this contempt proceeding is all about. And with that, I yield back.
I yield back my time. Mr. Nadler? Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Ms. Jackson-Lee? Ms. Jackson-Lee votes aye. Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson of Georgia? Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes aye. Mr. Deutsch? Mr. Deutsch votes aye. Ms. Betts? Mr. Richmond? Mr. Jeffries? Mr. Cicilline? Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Mr. Liu votes aye. Mr. Raskin? Mr. Raskin votes aye. Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Demings? Ms. Demings votes aye. Mr. Correa? Mr. Correa votes aye. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Ms. Garcia? Aye. Ms. Garcia votes aye. Mr. Neguse? Mr. Neguse votes aye. Ms. McBath? Ms. McBath votes
now,
aye.
Just in case some of you ain't doing
Mr.
all
Stanton?
this out of the
Mr. Stanton votes aye. Ms. Dean? Aye. Ms. Dean votes aye. Ms. McParcel-Powell? Ms. McParcel-Powell votes aye. Ms. Escobar? Aye. Ms. Escobar votes aye. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins votes no. Mr. Sensenbrenner? Mr. Shabbat? Mr. Shabbat votes no. Mr. Gomer? Mr. Jordan? Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Buck? Mr. Buck votes no. Mr. Ratcliffe? Mr. Ratcliffe votes no. Ms. Roby? Mr. Gates? Mr. Johnson of Louisiana? Mr. Biggs? Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock? Mr. McClintock votes no.
Is ready.
Ms.
Unless you
Lesko?
can handle more of the enemy.
Mr. Reschenthaler? Mr. Reschenthaler votes no. Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Armstrong? Mr. Armstrong votes no. Mr. Stubbe? Mr. Stubbe votes no.
Has every member voted who wishes to vote? The gentlelady from Washington?
Ms. Jayapal votes aye.
The gentleman from Tennessee?
Mr. Cohen votes aye.
The gentlelady from Arizona?
Ms. Lesko, you are not recorded. Ms. Lesko votes no.
Are there any other members of the committee who have not been recorded who wish to be recorded? The clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 20 ayes and 12 noes.
The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. There are votes about to be called on the floor at 1:30. It is now 1:31. They should be called momentarily. The committee will stand in recess until 2:30. It should give members time to get a little quick lunch too. The committee will recess until 2:30.
Everything in orders, operator? Is that a pun? I will attempt to bypass this fault.
There, the rest of their lives is something that we should not underestimate. I did a town hall a few weeks ago with Parkland High School students, and one of the local students stood up and said, I have a nightmare every night, and I only wake up from that nightmare because my alarm goes off. These are soft targets now that are schools and churches and synagogues, and we cannot allow this to become and we cannot allow this to become the new normal. So, we want to have no guns purchased under the age of 21. We want bump stocks to be banned. And we cannot allow this to become the new normal. So, we want to have no guns purchased under the age of 21. We want bump stocks to be banned.
Our position has been compromised. Defend the cargo until reinforcements arrive.
Having teachers with guns is not the answer. The answer is getting some really strict laws on the books so that young kids can't access these guns.
I want to talk about what's been going on in the Hill today, just an extraordinary vote. It's coming up on whether to hold Attorney General William Barr in contempt for refusing to hand over an unredacted version of the Mueller report. What does this really do? Does this really do anything in the end?
Well, this is turning up the heat. There's no question that holding him in contempt will then throw him and we will have the hopes that will be expedited. The Congress has the right to access the underlying documents of the Mueller report. There's no question about that. I can't imagine a court ruling otherwise. But they are throwing every obstacle in our way because the president has, in many respects, become a dictator. He is trying to prevent Congress from doing its oversight function, and we won't accept that. And if necessary, we can do what's called inherent contempt, which means we can call on the Sergeant of Arms to bring in Mr. Barr and have him appear before the full House. And then either he testifies or he
do you really see that as happening? Suggest that is not going to happen.
Well, legally we have the power to do that. We are using
Should the House of Representatives do that?
Well, I am one of those that believe that we're not going to get the respect that we deserve as a co-equal branch of government until we more aggressively in asserting our authority, which we have, to access these documents. We have a right to know what the underlying documents said. We have a right to be able to access the tax returns of the president to determine whether or not his engagement with foreign countries is in part why he will not touch Putin and why he is willing to cozy up.
Do you think the Attorney General
should Mr. Barr and have him appear before the full House and that either he testifies or he is fine?
Do you really see that as happening? Because we've talked to some legal experts who suggest that is not true.
Legally, we have the power to do that. We are using the...
Should the House of Representatives do that?
Well, I am one of those that believe that we're not going to give the respect that we deserve as a co-equal branch of government until we act a little more aggressively in our authority, which we have to access these documents. We have a right to know what the underlying documents says. We have a right to be able to access the tax returns of the president to determine whether or not his engagement with foreign countries is in part why he will not touch Putin and why he is willing to cozy up to him.
Do you think the Attorney General should go to jail?
I think the Attorney General should do his job, and that means turning over those underlying documents. You have over 600 former U.S. attorneys basically making the case that this is a no-brainer, that there was obstruction. And then you have the Attorney General who spins it as a PR person would and suggests that he did not obstruct justice, suggests to me, and I think to many others, that he is the Attorney General for the United States of America. He is the attorney for the president.
Warframe is strong. All right, Congresswoman Jackie Spear, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brianna.
President Trump is set to roll out new sanctions against Iran today as they retreat in part from the nuclear deal. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta will join me to talk about what this
Reinforcements of... Do you choose to leave now?
I've diagnosed heart condition, and erectile dysfunction was actually the first sign that something was wrong. Luckily, I'm a doctor, an expert in sexual health in Saxdad. Not everyone has some health conditions and really talk about it. We started Roman to change that. Now you can go online and chat with a physician.
And if treatment is right for you, we'll ship genuine medication right to your door. If you're experiencing ED, hair loss, cold sores, or other issues, let's take care of it.
At the end of the day, there's nothing better than a glass of wine, especially that first sip. The taste is so important, and wine just doesn't taste as good a day after it's been opened. What if you didn't actually have to open the bottle at all? With my Coravin, I never need to pull the cork. I simply insert the needle, tip, and pour. The cork reseals to preserve the rest of the bottle for months or even years. At home, relaxing with a glass of wine, or entertaining friends. Just insert, tip, and pour. Buy Coravin at these fine retailers. I'm feeling good. Make the most of your business card with Vistaprint. 500 standard cards start at just $9.99 with code BC now. Own the now with Vistaprint. You're turning onto the street when you barely clip a passing car. Minor accident. No big deal, right? Wrong. Your insurance company is going to raise your rate after the other car got a scratch so small you could have fixed it with a pen. Maybe you should take that pen and use it to sign up with a different insurance company.
For drivers with accident forgiveness, Liberty Mutual won't raise their rates because of their first accident. Liberty Mutual Insurance.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
What you don't see can hurt you. If you just monitor your credit, you can miss some identity theft threats. LifeLock now includes Norton to help protect you from even more threats. Join now at LifeLock.com.
You check to see how the markets are doing, but what you really need to know is how you're doing. Where do you go for that? PersonalCapital.com. You'll get all these free retirement and investing tools, plus wealth management options. Join at PersonalCapital.com.
Ordis is half angry. I may require maintenance after all.
Blue Ribbon smoked baby bags. And hickory bourbon grove.
Ribs, meat ribs. Endless ribs, Golden Corral, the only one for everyone.
Closed captioning brought to you by Mesobook.com.
We offer a free book on mesothelioma. Call for the free book and receive so much more. Call 1-800-831-3700.
Now to the rising tension between Iran and the United States. President Hassan Rouhani announced today that Iran will partially withdraw from the landmark nuclear
Cut down the...
He says Iran will no longer abide by limits on stockpiles of enriched uranium, and this move is coming a year after President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the agreement. Also, the U.S. military is increasing its military presence in the region. The Trump administration says there is a, quote, specific and credible intelligence of plans by Iran to target U.S. forces. We have former Defense Secretary and former CIA Director Leon Panetta with us now, joining us from Monterey, California. Thanks, Secretary, for being here.
Good to be with you, Brianna.
Secretary Pompeo made this unscheduled stop in Iraq instead of meeting with Germany's Angela Merkel. He was there talking to Iran's next-door neighbor, a key ally in the region, as this situation is escalating. Are you concerned that this situation could go in a bad direction?
I don't think there's any question that it could go in a bad direction because the tensions are escalating on all sides. And the problem is that there's a danger of miscalculation. As those tensions increase, all you need is someone to make a terrible mistake, shoot off a missile, shoot down a plane, and suddenly we're involved in a military confrontation. So this whole situation is very dangerous for the world.
So when you see what Democratic Senator Tim Kaine said, he said he's worried that President Trump is leading the U.S. toward war with Iran. This is a statement that he's made. Trump's White House has taken a series of actions to increase tensions, including misrepresenting the regular deployment of the USS Abraham Lincoln as a warning to Iran.
The enemy is at our doorstep.
The Trump administration has
you
no
must
legal
defend our
authority to start
equipment
a
until
war against
reinforcements
Iran
arrive.
without the consent of Congress. Do you share his concerns, and specifically, do you share his concerns about how the Trump administration is handling this?
Well, look, these tensions are increasing, but the issue right now is the kind of intelligence that we have with regards to what steps Iran is taking. I mean, if those are credible intelligence threats that indicate that they're in the process of trying to develop an approach to attacking our forces, then I think the United States has to take steps to make sure we defend our forces. I think the deployment of a carrier into that region, which is something we've always had. We've always had a carrier there. So I can understand the concern about kind of using this as an indication that we're taking extraordinary action. The fact is we've always had a carrier there, and we should have a carrier there in order to make sure that we can defend our forces if these intelligence threats prove to be real.
Now, Secretary Pompeo said that he discussed the threat with Iraq's president and prime minister. Let's listen to some of this. What all does the U.S. need to do when it comes to Iraq to make sure that this situation remains stable? Sorry, Secretary, can you hear me? It's Brianna. Can you hear me? All right, we're going to take a quick break and try to get Secretary Panetta back with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Joan London. Today's senior living communities have never
than better, with amazing amenities like movie theaters, exercise rooms and swimming pools, public cafes, bars and bistros, even pet care services. And there's never been an easier way to get great advice. A Place for Mom is a free service that pairs you with a local advisor to help you sort through your options and find the perfect place. A Place for Mom. You know your family. We know senior living. Together we'll make the right choice.
Hi, I'm Lisa. Definitely would like to meet someone special. Looking for a real relationship? Well, I definitely would like to find a long-term relationship. Somebody who is smart, who has an excellent sense of humor. Can't wait to meet you. Bye. Check out Match right now for free.
We went to your home, we couldn't find you. Oh, we found out you worked here and you're
Duncan just protected his family with a $500,000 life insurance. How much do you think it cost him? $100 a month? $75? $50? Actually, Duncan got his $500,000 for under $28 a month. Less than $1 a day. His secret? Select Quote. In just minutes, a Select Quote agent will comparison shop nearly a dozen highly rated life insurance and give you the choice of your 5 best rates. Duncan's wife, Kathy, got a $750,000 policy for under $23 a month. Give your family the security it needs at a price you can afford. Since 1985, Select Quote has saved over 1 million families millions of dollars on life insurance. Call now, 800-711-9402. Or visit SelectQuote.com. Discover what over 1 million families know now. We shop, you save.
In an era of online retail, where everything is taken away, buying a car should be no different. That's why Expert Models you can buy browse and buy over 10,000 cars. You can even trade in your old car, all while binge watching your favorites. Afterwards, we'll deliver your car to you, or you can pick it up from our car vending machine. Either way, your car comes with a 7-day return policy. So grab a seat, relax in your puppy pants, and enjoy the new way to buy a car at Carvana.
Since we've retired, we're on the go now more than ever.
But that hasn't left us much time to maintain our home.
We used to do all the work ourselves.
Now we use Home Advisor to find local pros for almost every project.
We check their credentials and then read reviews left by real customers.
And we always get a few quotes from different pros before deciding.
So now we're not chasing home projects.
Not anymore. Just our grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
Go to HomeAdvisor.com or download the free app. If you just want a slice of pizza, you won't buy the whole pie. So if you don't use your cell phone that much, why pay for more than you need? For as low as $20 a month, you can get talk, text, and data from Consumer Cellular with no contract and connections on the nation's largest wireless network. You also receive award-winning support. Consumer Cellular has received the J.D. Power Award for highest customer service again. Plus, AARP members get exclusive discounts. Switch to Consumer Cellular today with our 30-day guarantee. It's completely risk-free. Call, go online, or find us at Target.
Tomorrow, former FBI Director James Comey and new season 60,000 off, live from D.C.
People who know better have had the courage to stand up and speak the truth.
And tomorrow night, 8 Eastern, only
These folks, they don't have time to go to the post office. They have businesses to run, customers to care for, lives to get home
Reinforcements
to.
available.
They use
Do you choose to
stamps.com.
leave now or
Print
continue
discounted
fighting?
postage for any letter, any package, anytime, right from your computer. All the amazing services of the post office, only cheaper. Get our special TV offer. A 4-week trial plus postage and a digital scale. Go to stamps.com/try and never go to the post office again.
I'm Chris Cuomo. Let's get after it.
Cuomo Prime Time, tonight 9 Eastern.
back now with former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta. And I want to get your perspective, Sarah, since you were former White House Chief of Staff in the Clinton administration. You were there for some pretty contentious times, the beginning of the Whitewater Special Independent Counsel's investigation. I want to get your take on this standoff between President Trump and congressional Democrats. The White House at this point is refusing pretty much any and all requests for testimony and documents that pertain to investigations of the president. How do you see this situation?
Well, I think our forefathers are turning over in their grave right now watching this, because our forefathers were very clear that they didn't want power to be centralized in any one branch of government, particularly in a king or a president, and not in the legislative branch and not in the courts. So that's why they established our system of checks and balances. This president is basically taking a position he's not going to adhere to that system of checks and balances. And for that reason, it obviously jeopardizes the way our courts are going to have to rule. I think they will rule in favor of our system of checks and balances. The real question now is how long is it going to take before that decision is made?
As a former Chief of Staff, what is the responsibility of people around the president when it comes to what's really obstinate?
Look, the way it's operated in the past is that you're trying to pick and choose the different requests that are made from Congress. There are some that you will cooperate with. There are some where you might there are some where you'll try to negotiate some kind of resolution. But you do this on a case-by-case basis. What this administration has done, if you've unheard of, is to take a blanket approach that they're not going to give anything to the Congress. They're not going to cooperate in any way with the Congress. And that is just an out-and-out rejection of our constitutional system of checks and balances. That's why it isn't just politics. Very frankly, it's dangerous to our system of government.
All right, Secretary, thank you so much, Leon Panetta, with us. We appreciate it.
Good to be with
you. So this just in, the Department of Homeland Security is moving forward a new plan that would have Border Patrol agents conduct the initial interviews for migrants seeking asylum. This is an idea pushed by White House Special Advisor Stephen Miller. Immigration advocates are afraid that this can make the asylum claim process more difficult and may result in improper deportations. There are also concerns about putting extra responsibility on Border Patrol agents who are already overburdened. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have appeared together with the royal baby for the first time since his birth. We're going to tell you his name and how they chose it. But the president lost more than nearly every other American taxpayer over a decade, lost more money. This is just one of the revelations from some of his exposed tax transcripts, including a mysterious income that is raising eyebrows.
This is a call to America's innovators and achievers. It's time to work smarter and faster than ever before with steel. The precision of Settlement Industries makes it possible. Our industry-leading products, manufacturing excellence, and advanced e-commerce and logistics technologies will help you build America's future better with steel. Let's get to work.
This is my body of proof.
Proof of less joint pain and clear skin. And proof that I can fight psoriatic arthritis.
With Humira. Humira targets and blocks a specific source of inflammation that contributes to both joint and skin pain. It's proven to help relieve pain, stop further irreversible joint damage, and clear skin in many adults. Humira is the #1 prescribed biologic for psoriatic arthritis.
Humira can lower your ability to fight infections. Serious and sometimes fatal infections, including tuberculosis and cancers, including lymphoma, have happened, as have blood, liver, and nervous system problems, serious allergic reactions, and new or worsening heart failure. Tell your doctor to visit areas where certain fungal infections are common. And if you've had complete hepatitis, those infections or have flu-like symptoms, don't go on
Ask your rheumatologist about Humira.
Go to myTuesdaysFood.com to see fruit in action.
Movie Tuesdays Big Free. Starting at just $11.99. Get 60 yeah. Tickets to free entree. And tickets to the choice is yours. Booking Tuesdays is free, starting at just $11.99. Now delivering directly to you.
No cover-up spray here. Cheaper aerosol pink cover-up odors varying in a flowery box. Switch to Febreze Airfest. Febreze eliminates even the toughest odors from the air. Freshen up. No cover-up. Febreze.
This Mother's Day, give the gift of Britpop. In mysteries, histories, laughter, and lifestyle, streaming direct to your favorite devices.
I absolutely love it.
And with upcoming exclusives like Shetland and the RHS Chelsea Flower Show live from London, there's never been a better bring into the special British telly. Treat mom to a 1-year Britpop gift subscription for Mother's Day, or start your own free trial at Britpop.com.
You have to celebrate your mother because of all the things that she's done for you. The whole point of Mother's Day is with your family and your community. She's really sarcastic and feisty. I'm definitely feisty.
This is an absolutely amazing Mother's Day.
It's normal to get over 125 genetic reports with $30 off each Health Plus Ancestry Kit at 23andme.com.
Tomorrow, former FBI Director James Comey and Pete Town Hall, live from 16. People will know them have the courage to stand up and speak the truth. Anderson Cooper Moderates. Tomorrow night,
Action is ready. Unless you can handle
They
more
saved thousands of Americans in Vietnam.
She said, I'm Hmong. I'm like, what is that?
Now, the Hmong people fight for a country to call their own. And all you United States of America with W. Kamau Bell, Sunday at 10 on CNN.
Hey America, do you feel like you're constantly squirming to get comfortable in your outdated underwear?
If so, you know these awkward adjustment moments all too well.
The wedgie shift, the party pick, and the hide and seek.
You won't have those problems when you upgrade to Tommy John.
Our underwear is made with a luxuriously soft, lightweight, breathable fabric that stretches in 16 different directions. It stays put so there's no bunching, no riding up, and no more wedgies. Guaranteed.
Our stay-put waistband won't roll down or leave marks, and Tommy John underwear is designed for maximum breathability, which means you'll be cool and dry all day long. Overcome the uncomfortable
with Tommy John.
Visit TommyJohn.com now. Tomorrow night, 8 Eastern, only on CNN.
They saved thousands of Americans in Vietnam.
She said, I'm Hmong. I'm like, what is that?
Now, the Hmong people fight for a country to call their own. And all you United States of America with W. Kamau Bell, Sunday at 10 on CNN.
Hey America, do you feel like you're constantly squirming to get comfortable in your outdated underwear?
If so, you know these awkward adjustment moments all too well.
The wedgie shift, the party pick, and the hide and seek.
You won't have those problems when you upgrade to Tommy John.
Our underwear is made with a luxuriously soft, lightweight, breathable fabric that stretches in 16 different directions. It stays put so there's no bunching, no riding up, and no more wedgies. Guaranteed.
Our stay-put waistband won't roll down or leave marks, and Tommy John underwear is designed for maximum breathability, which means you'll be cool and dry all day long. Overcome the uncomfortable
with Tommy John.
Visit TommyJohn.com now and use the promo code on your screen to get 20% off. Free shipping on orders over $75. And our best pair you'll ever wear or it's free guarantee.
Everything in orders, operator? Is that a pun?
TommyJohn.com today. Tommy
I will attempt to
John,
bypass
no
this
adjustment needed.
Chasing Life with Dr. Sanjay Gupta, Saturday nights at 9 Eastern.
Hi there, I'm Brooke Baldwin. You're watching CNN. Thank you for being with me. We begin with the president's collision course with the Constitution and Congress over the Mueller report. The House Judiciary Committee, now on a break, is expected to vote just this afternoon on whether to hold Attorney General Bill Barr in contempt for refusing to turn over the report's unredacted sections. That is just one of the ethics